I remember the day vividly. October 15th, fall in New York, the kind of crisp morning that makes you believe anything is possible. After 14 months of relentless work, I had finally brought the Harrison-Wayland merger to the finish line. A $300 million deal that would change the landscape of biotech manufacturing across North America. My name is Sarah Emerson. For 6 years, I'd been the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Harrison Pharmaceuticals. 6 years of 80-hour weeks. 6 years of sacrificing weekends, birthdays, and relationships for the company, and it had all led to this moment, my career-defining achievement. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. I arrived at the office at 6:30 that morning, reviewing every line of the contracts one final time. Everything was perfect. I'd thought of everything. The financial models were flawless. The integration strategy was comprehensive. The legal teams on both sides had cleared every hurdle. At 9 a.m., I received a calendar invitation. Pre-signing executive meeting, 10 a.m., CEO's office, mandatory. Nothing unusual, just a final review with the leadership team before the big moment. I entered Richard Harrison's corner office at precisely 10 a.m. The room had an unusual energy. Our CFO, Mark, wouldn't meet my eyes. Our legal counsel, Janet, kept shuffling papers unnecessarily. Richard himself sat behind his massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. "Sarah, take a seat," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I noticed someone else in the room, a young man, perhaps 30, in an expensive but poorly fitted suit. He stood near the window, smiling slightly. I didn't recognize him. "I'll get right to it," Richard continued, his voice oddly formal. "We've decided to make a change to the deal team for today's signing." I felt a small twist in my stomach. "What kind of change?" "Jason here will be taking the lead on the final signing and presentation." Richard nodded toward the young man by the window. The twist in my stomach became a knot. "I'm sorry, who is Jason?" The young man stepped forward, hand extended. "Jason Harrison, Richard's nephew, MBA from Wharton. I've been consulting on the deal from the outside." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I looked back at Richard. "He's been consulting on the deal. This is the first I'm hearing of this." Richard cleared his throat. "Jason has some fresh perspectives on the integration strategy. The board feels his approach aligns better with our 5-year vision." "The board?" I nearly choked on the words. "Richard, I've led this deal from day one. I know every aspect inside and out. Wayland's team has built their entire trust relationship with me personally." "Oh, which is why you'll still be at the table," Richard said smoothly. "Jason will simply be leading the presentation and handling the formal signing." Jason smiled again. "I've studied your work extensively, Sarah. Truly impressive. I just have some thoughts on restructuring the R&D integration that could save us about $20 million in the first year." I stared at him in disbelief. "We've already agreed on the R&D integration with Wayland. Their CEO specifically protected their research division. It's a non-negotiable point." "Well," Jason said with a small laugh, "everything's negotiable until the ink is dry." I turned back to Richard. "This makes no sense. The deal is done. We're just signing today. Why would you risk changing anything at this point?" Richard wouldn't meet my eyes now. "The decision has been made, Sarah. Jason will lead. You'll support." The room was silent. I looked at each face. Richard's stubbornness, Jason's smug confidence, Mark's discomfort, Janet's resignation. And suddenly, with perfect clarity, I understood what was happening. I was being pushed aside so Richard's nephew could take credit for my work. 14 months of my life, countless nights of lost sleep, a deal that I had architected from scratch. And at the final moment, it would become Jason Harrison's accomplishment. I stood up slowly. "No." Richard looked up, surprised. "Excuse me." I said no. I won't be supporting Jason today. I won't be attending the signing at all. Richard's face reddened. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. This is business, not personal." You're right, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. This is business. And in business, there are consequences for bad decisions. Replacing the person who built the entire deal hours before signing is a catastrophically bad decision. Are you threatening me? Richard asked, his voice low. I smiled for the first time since entering the room. Not at all. I'm simply informing you that I resign, effective immediately. And I'm also informing you that without me at that table, there will be no deal signed today. Jason laughed nervously. Come on, the paperwork is done. Anyone can handle a signature ceremony. I turned to him. Michael Wayland trusts me. He doesn't know you. He specifically told me last week that the only reason he agreed to this merger was because he trusted me to protect his people during the transition. We can handle Wayland, Richard said dismissively. I picked up my notebook and walked to the door. Evidently, you think you can handle everything without me, so go ahead and try. Janet spoke up for the first time. Sarah, please, let's discuss this rationally. I paused at the door. There's nothing to discuss. I've made more money for this company than anyone in this room. I've sacrificed everything for Harrison Pharmaceuticals, and my reward is being replaced by the CEO's nephew at the finish line. That tells me everything I need to know about my future here. I walked out, closed the door behind me, and headed straight to my office. I had exactly 4 hours to clear out my things before the signing ceremony that I would not be attending. As I packed my office, my phone exploded with calls and messages. Richard, Janet, Mark, even Jason tried calling me. I ignored them all. I boxed up 6 years of my life in under an hour, called a car service, and was gone by noon. From my apartment, I sent one email. Michael, due to unforeseen circumstances, I have resigned from Harrison Pharmaceuticals, effective immediately. I wanted you to hear this directly from me before today's meeting. Respectfully, Sarah Emerson. Michael Wayland called me within minutes. Sarah, what the hell is going on? His voice was a mixture of concern and panic. I was removed from leading the signing ceremony this morning and replaced by Richard's nephew, who plans to renegotiate parts of the deal we've already agreed upon. Silence on the line. Then, is this some kind of joke? I wish it were. Apparently, Jason Harrison has fresh perspectives on the integration strategy. Jason Harrison? I've never even heard this name before. Michael's voice had turned cold. Are you telling me Richard waited until hours before signing to bring in someone new? That's exactly what I'm telling you. Another long silence. Sarah, I agreed to this merger because of you. I trusted you. I know. I'm sorry it's ending this way. Michael sighed heavily. I'm calling Richard right now. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange, detached state. 6 years of my career had just gone up in flames. I should have felt devastated. Instead, I felt oddly liberated. At 3:30 p.m., my former assistant Amy texted me, "Total disaster. Wayland team showed up, asked for you, then left when told you resigned. Richard is having a meltdown." By evening, industry news sites were reporting that the Harrison-Wayland merger talks had unexpectedly collapsed. Harrison Pharmaceutical stock dropped 8% in after-hours trading. The next morning, I woke to find 37 missed calls on my phone. I ignored them all and went for a long run in Central Park instead. When I returned, there was a text from Michael Wayland. Dinner tonight, 7 p.m., Le Bernardin. Just you and me. I accepted. What did I have to lose? Michael was already seated when I arrived. He stood and greeted me warmly, as if I was still the deal leader for Harrison rather than an unemployed former executive. Sarah, he said after we'd ordered, I pulled out of the deal yesterday. I gathered as much from the news. He nodded. I told Richard exactly why. I said we made this deal with Sarah Emerson, not with some nephew we've never met. I smiled slightly. I appreciate the vote of confidence. It's more than that. Michael leaned forward. Harrison's board is in emergency sessions today. Their stock is down 12% now. Shareholders are asking questions. That's not my problem anymore, I said, though I couldn't help feeling a flicker of satisfaction. Actually, Michael said, placing a folder on the table, I'm hoping to make it your problem again, in a different way. I raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Wayland needs a new chief strategy officer. The position reports directly to me, sits on the executive committee, and comes with a significant equity package. He slid the folder toward me. I'm offering you the job. I stared at the folder. Michael, before you answer, he continued, you should know that we're planning to acquire Harrison's manufacturing division as a standalone purchase for significantly less than the merger would have cost us. I felt a chill run down my spine. How much less? Michael smiled. About $120 million less. Richard's desperate now. He overplayed his hand, and the board knows it. We'll probably announce in about 2 weeks. I opened the folder. The compensation package inside made my breath catch. So, Michael said, watching my face, what do you say? Want to help me pick apart the company that just threw you away? The next 2 weeks unfolded like a dream, or perhaps a perfectly executed revenge plot. I accepted Michael's offer on the spot, signing the contract before our desserts arrived. By morning, industry news outlets were buzzing with speculation. By afternoon, it was official. Sarah Emerson, former architect of the failed Harrison-Wayland merger, had joined Wayland Biotech as Chief Strategy Officer. Harrison Pharmaceuticals stock dropped another 4% on the news. I spent my first days at Wayland in a flurry of activity. Michael gave me a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River and complete autonomy to build my team. I hired 3 analysts away from Harrison within my first week. They brought with them intimate knowledge of Harrison's operations, knowledge that would prove invaluable in the coming weeks. On my 9th day at Wayland, Michael called me into his office. He was staring at his computer screen, a slight smile playing on his lips. Have you seen this? He asked, turning the screen toward me. It was a press release. Harrison Pharmaceuticals had announced a strategic restructuring. Richard Harrison was stepping down as CEO, effective immediately. The board had appointed an interim CEO while conducting a search for permanent leadership. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction from my voice. Michael chuckled. The board meeting transcript got leaked to the Wall Street Journal. Apparently, several members called the failed merger the most catastrophic leadership failure in the company's history. And what about the nephew? I asked. Jason Harrison has decided to pursue other opportunities, Michael read from the screen, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Translation: he was shown the door along with his uncle. I sat down across from Michael. So Harrison is vulnerable. Extremely. Michael closed his laptop. Their stock is down 18% since the merger fell through. Shareholders are in revolt. The executive team is in disarray. He leaned forward. It's time to make our move, Sarah. And then, for the next 3 days, I barely left my office. I dissected Harrison's operations, identified their most valuable assets, and built a surgical acquisition strategy. Instead of the comprehensive merger we had originally planned, we would now target only Harrison's advanced manufacturing division, the crown jewel of their operation. On Thursday morning, I presented my plan to Wayland's board. By Thursday afternoon, I had unanimous approval. By Thursday evening, our legal team was drafting the offer. On Friday morning, exactly 2 weeks after my resignation from Harrison, Michael and I walked into the temporary office of Harrison's interim CEO, Douglas Freeman. Freeman was a semi-retired pharmaceutical executive who had been on Harrison's board for years. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep fatigue that comes from trying to salvage a corporate disaster. Michael, Ms. "Emerson," he greeted us, not bothering to hide his wariness. "I assume this isn't a social call." "Doug?" Michael said warmly, as if they were old friends meeting for golf. "We have a proposition for you." Freeman's eyes flickered to me. "I'm sure you do." I placed a slim folder on his desk. "We're prepared to offer $180 million for Harrison's advanced manufacturing division, including all facilities, patents, and key personnel." Freeman stared at the folder without opening it. "The division, you know, is worth at least $250 million. It was worth $250 million 2 weeks ago," I corrected him, "before your stock went into free fall, before your CEO was forced out, before your shareholders started calling for blood." Freeman's jaw tightened. "This feels predatory, Sarah." "It's business," I replied, echoing Richard's words to me. "Not personal." For a moment I thought Freeman might throw us out of his office. Instead, he opened the folder and scanned our offer. "This is a hostile takeover," he said finally. Michael shook his head. "Not at all. It's a lifeline. Your shareholders get immediate value. Your company keeps its research division and consumer products. You stop the bleeding." Freeman looked up at me. "And you get your revenge." I met his gaze steadily. "I get to do my job. The job I've always done well, creating value through strategic partnerships." Freeman leaned back in his chair. "I'll need to take this to the board." "Of course," Michael said smoothly. "They have until Monday at 5 p.m. After that, our offer expires, and we'll be approaching your individual shareholders directly." As we stood to leave, Freeman called out, "Sarah, can I have a word? Alone?" Michael glanced at me. I nodded and he left the room. Freeman waited until the door closed. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. "Burning everything down because Richard wounded your pride?" I felt a flash of anger. "Is that what you think happened? That my pride was wounded? What would you call it?" I sat back down across from him. "I call it consequences, Doug. Richard and Jason thought they could push me aside and everything would continue as planned. They were wrong." I leaned forward. "And let's be clear, I didn't burn anything down. I walked away from a toxic situation. What happened afterward was the result of Richard's decisions, not mine." Freeman sighed. "You know, the board will likely accept your offer. We don't have much choice." "I know. And once we do, Harrison Pharmaceuticals will never be the same. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs in the restructuring." I felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but awareness of the wider impact. That was always going to happen in the merger. The difference is, under my original plan, those people would have had guaranteed positions at the combined company. I made sure of it. Freeman looked surprised. "You did?" "It was a non-negotiable part of my integration strategy, the one Jason was so eager to improve by cutting $20 million, which meant cutting people." I stood up. "You should ask to see the original merger documents, Doug. You might find that I wasn't the villain in this story." As I walked out, I felt Freeman's eyes on my back. For the first time since this all began, I wondered if my response had been proportionate to the offense. But then I remembered Richard's dismissive tone, Jason's smug smile, and the way they had tried to steal my work. No, I decided. They had made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. If Harrison accepted our offer, and we all knew they would, we needed to be ready to move quickly. I assembled transition teams, prepared communication strategies, and drafted retention packages for the key Harrison employees we wanted to keep. On Monday at 3:17 p.m., Douglas Freeman called Michael. "We accept your offer," he said simply. "Our legal team will contact yours to finalize the details." Just like that, it was done. In less than 3 weeks, I had gone from being pushed aside at Harrison to orchestrating the dismantling of their company from my new position at Wayland. The irony wasn't lost on me. The acquisition was announced the next morning. Harrison's stock stabilized, small comfort to a company that had lost nearly a fifth of its value in 2 weeks. Wayland's stock jumped 6% on the news. Financial analysts praised the strategic precision of the deal, noting that Wayland had acquired Harrison's most valuable asset at a significant discount. Nobody mentioned the personal drama behind the deal. In the business press, it was all about numbers and strategy. Only those of us on the inside knew the truth, that a $300 million merger had collapsed and turned into a $180 million targeted acquisition because one man had tried to give his nephew unearned glory. 3 days after the announcement, I received a surprising email from Janet, Harrison's legal counsel and my former colleague. "Sarah, I've accepted a position at Mercer & White starting next month. Before I go, I wanted you to know something. The decision to replace you with Jason was made the night before the signing. It wasn't planned in advance." Richard got a call from his sister, Jason's mother, that evening, and by morning, he had convinced himself it was the right move. Nobody else supported it, but nobody had the courage to stop it either, myself included. "I'm sorry, Janet." I read the email 3 times. So it had been even more impulsive and short-sighted than I'd thought. A last-minute family favor that ended up costing the company $120 million and numerous jobs. The absurdity of it was breathtaking. 2 weeks into the acquisition process, I was working late when my assistant told me I had a visitor. To my shock, it was Richard Harrison himself. He looked terrible, ashen and gaunt, as if he'd aged 10 years in a month. He stood awkwardly in my doorway, a ghost of his former imperious self. "May I come in?" he asked. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat down heavily. "I suppose you're enjoying this," he said without preamble, "this being the destruction of the company I built over 30 years. I closed my laptop. "Harrison Pharmaceuticals still exists, Richard. You still have your research division and consumer products. You still have a future. A diminished one." His voice was bitter. "And I've lost mine. The board is buying out my contract. Once the acquisition is complete, I'm officially retired." I said nothing. What was there to say? Richard looked around my new office. "Corner office, executive row. Quite a step up from your position at Harrison." "Yes," I agreed. "It turns out some companies value competence over nepotism." He flinched. "I made a mistake. A $120 million mistake, plus your job, your reputation, and hundreds of employee positions." "I know the cost," he snapped. Then, more quietly, "I know what it cost." We sat in silence for a moment. I wondered why he had come. For absolution? To make me feel guilty? To try to salvage something? "Jason was qualified," Richard said finally. "Wharton MBA, consulting experience." "Jason had never worked on the merger," I replied. "He didn't know the people involved, the sensitivities, the handshake agreements that made the deal work, and he was planning to renegotiate terms we had already settled." "He was family," Richard said, as if that explained everything. And perhaps for him it did. In that moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. "Why are you here, Richard?" He looked down at his hands. "I wanted to see if there was any way to..." He trailed off, then started again. "Is there any chance Wayland would consider a broader acquisition, bringing more of Harrison under your umbrella?" So that was it. A last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. "No," I said, not unkindly. "That ship has sailed. We're getting exactly what we want from Harrison now, at a much better price than before." Richard nodded slowly, as if he had expected this answer but had to try anyway. As he stood to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, the board was planning to promote you to COO after the merger. That's why I thought you could step back from the spotlight for one day, let Jason have his moment. I never imagined you'd walk away." I looked up at him, this man who had been my mentor and champion before he betrayed me. That's because you thought I needed Harrison more than Harrison needed me. You were wrong on both counts. After Richard left, I sat in my quiet office for a long time, watching the lights of New York City sparkle against the darkening sky. I thought about the whirlwind of the past month, the betrayal, the resignation, the new beginning, the acquisition. My phone chimed with a text from Michael. Celebratory dinner. The executive team wants to toast the architect of our biggest deal this year. I smiled and texted back, on my way. As I gathered my things, I thought about the lesson at the heart of this story. It wasn't about revenge, satisfying as it had been. It was about value, about knowing your worth and refusing to accept less than you deserve. Richard had thought I was replaceable. He had learned otherwise. At a cost of $120 million, his company's future and his own career. An expensive lesson, but one I wouldn't have traded for anything.